Someone called you alt-left.
I'm going to trigger a lot of people saying this. Here's how I view like the world is going. Here's a really, really insane example to me that I hear. I don't know if you've said this, but a lot of red pillars say this thing where it's like, you should never trying to find things that give you like a genuine source of joy, that like give you like a deep sense of meaning that feel really good. For me, it was music. The guiding principle that I've used for my life is there are things that I want to do. I have to be a certain person to do those things. So for me, success is like improving myself and kind of gradually sculpting and building myself to be that person. And the only person I can compare myself to is myself, because everybody's got like a unique starting point.
Jordon Peterson.
Jordan Peterson had a lot of good things to say before like 2018, I think, before his brain broke. Honestly, truly, he really did have a lot of good things to say. It's so interesting you say this, because you got there in such a different way, but I actually 1,000,000% agree.
Things that I know you've spoken about a good bit recently is kind of the concerns of too much freedom. So if you just blast open all of the doors, you don't need to adhere to any expected traditions. There are no stereotypes, no archetypes. Nothing is grounded in biological fact and then, perpetuated by culture, which causes everybody to have to find themselves out from first principles. It's like, you're a man. Okay. There are no expectations for what you're supposed to be as a man, which means that your job, Sono, is to deal with the existential pain, the crushing weight of existence, and just work out what you're supposed to be going forward. I wonder whether unlimited degrees of freedom causes people to just become nihilistic. It's like existentially crushed. And then they go, oh, I don't really know how to do this. And they give up, as opposed to perhaps if you do have some slightly more conflicted, but slightly more constrained expectations for a conservative, maybe that does give you guardrails, which actually gives you a little bit more movement in the right direction.
Yeah, I think our identity, truly, it's fractured among every person that we meet. It's fractured in society to some extent. Like when we think of what does it mean to be successful at XYZ, we tell ourselves a story that it means I want to be the best person that I can be. But that's truly, I think that's a lie. I think what you want to be is you want to be the best person that like everybody thinks you can be, or everybody says you can be. Like, what does it mean to be the best version of a man? It's not just what you think it means to be a man. It's, well, what does everybody think it means to be a man? And then achieving success on that level where everybody else is looking towards it, I think is truly where a lot of the good feelings come. Because we're social beings, right? We socialize. That's how humans succeed. We never lived as like individual hunters. We're very much like pack animals, social creatures. So if every single person in a society has their own view of everything, some people will be okay. Probably a very, very small minority, less than like 2% probably, or like that type of role. I like that type of role. That's fun for me. I'm a very discreet, autistic, whatever. But for most people, you want to be the best of what everybody agrees is the best to be. It's the age old, I remember the 90s and the 2000s, there are lots of jokes like this, like, you're unique just like everyone else, When you want to have like the most unique and cool fashion, you don't really want the most unique and cool fashion. You want the thing that everybody else wants, but just not everybody else can afford or get. But it has to be something that we all agree is the coolest thing. And then that's what makes you like the most unique, But it's this weird like delusion we have where we're like, oh yeah, like I really do want to be like a truly unique and outstanding individual. And it's like, not really. That's terrifying. You just want to fit very neatly within the fold of what's socially acceptable, but you want to do it like in the very narrow parts that not everybody can afford,
Is modern liberalism incompatible with happiness on average, do you think, in the way that a lot of people in the sort of super progressive position hold it?
When in order to truly learn about like electronics, when you take things apart, like remotes and shit, you don't learn anything until you actually put it back together, okay? And I think one of the problems we have, especially on the left, is we deconstruct so many different ideas, but we don't ask ourselves, why the were they there the way that they were? I think that
Chesterton's electronics.
What?
Chesterton's electronics, like Chesterton's fence.
Oh, I have no idea what that is, but I'll say it. Like,
you've not heard of Chesterton's fence?
No, what is that?
There is no way that you've gone through your life and not heard of this. So Chesterton's fence there is a fence in a field. Somebody walks up to it, a conservative and a liberal both walk up to it. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of just a panel of fence in the middle of a field. And they think, well, there's no point for this to be here. The conservative presumes someone has put this here, even though I can't work out why it's here, we'd better leave it. Mm-hmm. The liberal says there's evidently no use for it, let's tear it down. It's basically don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, or don't throw bathwater out until you've worked out why there might be a baby in there.
Okay, sure. That's exactly what I'm talking about, basically. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but so I think we had an issue with that. So when you ask, like, is liberalism incompatible with...
Like the current iteration, the most modern 2023 version of what most people like caricature as liberalism, is it incompatible with happiness on average?
I think it can be, but I think we're pushing a little bit too far. We're not asking ourselves Like, are we throwing out the baby with the bathwater, basically? There's a lot of cool things that can happen with deconstructing gender roles. And I think there's a lot of value to throwing out some things. Like, I think that, for instance, women can be more successful than we ever thought possible. That seems to be a thing that we're even more surprised about every single day, especially when it comes to school.
Correct.
But does that mean that we need to have no gender roles whatsoever? Like, do we need to abolish every single thing related to like male or female archetypes? Because there's a lot of people that draw a lot of value from those. Probably not. We probably don't have to do that. But people are so keen to get rid of everything that it's hard to ground like any of our conversations anymore in any type of real thing,
Yes. Well, if you demonize motherhood, that means that there are innate biological urges for women to become mothers. But this self-hatred thing that you mentioned about white liberals must also happen for women who maybe feel like they're supposed to have a career, but it's like, well, I kind of like the idea of being a mom. I think 86% of women say that being a stay-at-home mom is an option that they aspire to have, like just the potential that they could have. But the self-hatred would be rampant if you were to actually be truthful about that, which causes internal conflict and strife.
Yeah, I would imagine so. That 86% number sounds really high, but I imagine
it's an option that they would aspire to have, like potential of it. The bar is set very low.
Sure. I think I agree. So it's so hard for people to it's really hard for people to like live with and accept that other people around them can be different. Like, it feels like people are very keen to just like hammer home like every fucking idea. Like, for instance, like on the left for progressives, we talk a lot about like diversity of thought and everything, or diversity or whatever. And there's not very much diversity in a lot of friend groups on the left or the right, Like, people say, oh, I've got like a conservative friend. It's like, no, you don't. You've got a friend who's like a conservative, but they hate Trump. They're not a big fan of guns. They just like don't want a $25 an hour minimum wage, right? Show me a conservative friend you have that like drinks moonshine and wears a MAGA hat. Okay, you show me like a real conservative, right? There's not like we're very much like separated from each other.
Was that ever the case though? Was that the case in the 90s?
Where we had friends that were very different from each other. I feel like the internet has changed things a lot, because now you can hyper select groups of friends and individuals you never could before. Like, you couldn't really find, if you had really extremist ideas, to some extent you were forced to confront the people around you and kind of integrate.
You couldn't tumble down into your own echo chamber on Reddit or Telegram or Discord because you were geographically constrained.
Yeah. If you wanted to like be a vacuum fucker in like 1990, people are going to kind of look at you kind of weird, and you're going to be on your own there. Fucker. Somebody that vacuums.
That's not a euphemism?
No.
Oh.
Whereas today, if you wanted to vacuums, you could probably find an online support group for it. Like, they will give you like the best vacuums to have sex with, and you can do that your whole life, But I'm just saying that like you probably to some extent in like the 80s, 90s before the internet, like you kind of have to like talk to your neighbors and be somewhat grounded.
People around you.
Yeah. Whereas today you have this 21, 22-year-old kid who's leaking classified documents to look cool to a bunch of people on Discord. Bro, what the are you doing?
Yes.
It's like Jesus. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, it's the freedom thing again. So the conversation I had in Qatar about masculinity came down to the fundamental tension of the guy I was speaking to said we need to kind of blow open the doors of what it means to be a man because they're constraining, and some people who don't fit into those existing paradigms are made to feel like they're not a man, or there's discord, right? There's discontinuity between them. My realization was, well, yeah, totally. There are certainly ways that you could optimize for every single part of the normal distribution, right? Like right out to 0 and 100. But if you do that, then it's the same as it being nothing. Like if masculinity is everything, it's also nothing. And the same thing goes for like pick whatever stereotype or archetype you want to have. If you blast the doors open completely, you're saying you need to work this out for yourself. There are no expectations. There are no guardrails. Nobody is coming to help you. And if you do use any of those traditions that have come from the past,
you're going to get attacked for it.
Yes, precisely. That's you being like there's like by the patriarchy or feminism or whatever.
Yeah, there's like two ways you can go. Like one is that you have like the hyper rigid defined, like this is what it means to be a man and nothing outside can work. And then you've got like this like blow open everything, and it's like we can't say there's anything about being a man.
Correct.
And it's like there is a third option that we were kind of gunning for in like the late 90s, early 2000s, it felt like, where it was like, listen, we can actually blow open really wide what it means to be a man or a woman. If you want to be a guy and paint your nails and wear makeup, then go for it. And you know what? A lot of guys aren't going to be like you, but that's okay. You just kind of like can do your own thing. But now it's not enough to say this can be like really different and that's okay. Now there has to be kind of like this tear down of like the norm in the middle as well. Like it can't just be that like you can be unique and kind of do your own thing and whatever. Now like everybody has to be nothing in order to make it okay. Instead of teaching people that like sometimes you're just like, it's okay to be a little bit weird. You can be weird, but now like weird is like a slur and now it's being, no, actually I'm not weird. You're just like hetero-cis normative and this is like a horrible thing for society. It's like, okay.
Yeah, so optimizing for the extremes and sort of bringing those in and making them part of the norm. One of the other things, again, that I've been thinking about is how this relates to people's lack of capacity or desire or motivation to deal with difficulty or suffering or any kind of like anything that requires you to push through hard stuff to find meaning on the other side of it. And I guess it's kind of the same. Like, why? Why bother? Like, if the system's rigged against me, if there is no meaning in anything, if having a family, all of the previous anchors that we would have found meaning from in life, if all of those have been blown open, then like if I do come up against any kind of difficulty, that should have been snowplowed out of my way before I got here.
Yeah, there are two concepts. It's called stress and eustress, where yeah, oh my God, I'm so glad a friend taught me this like 2 years ago because I'd never heard of this before. It was really, one thing that's really difficult for me is I love stress. It is very empowering to me. When I'm in stressful situations, I feel like I'm alive, okay? When people are gunning for my career, writing big things, accusing me of shit, it's very fun for me to navigate those things. It's like, oh. And I learned this term a couple years ago. A friend, she read a book called, it was like The Power of Stress or something. I don't remember, something like that. But she said that, she said the reason why you probably feel this way is because there's two types of stress. There's stress, which is bad for you. Physiologically, it's a horrible thing. It causes a lot of negative health. And then there's something called eustress, which is similar to where you're stressed. But the difference is for eustress is when you're going through stressful things, but you feel like you've got tools to deal with it. And stress is when you feel helpless. And despite how weird my upbringing is in my life, or whatever, I've never felt helpless. I've always felt like if something is fucked, I'm the only person who's going to do anything about it. I have to do something. We'll figure it out. You know, I'm going to have to work 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, but we'll do something, you know? So for me, stressful situations are like, okay, it's challenging, but like, I got to work my way through it. But when kids don't have the ability to learn how to manage or deal with stressful environments, then stress becomes this like horrific, all-encompassing like blanket of darkness that falls on you. And you're like, fuck, I can't do anything. I'm paralyzed. I don't know what to do. Like, there's so much. And like, they have no idea how to deal with any of the adversity. So yeah, I agree that like, people today, like if the adversity is not plowed out of their way, they basically turn into these like helpless frumps of nothing that like can't deal with anything. Yeah. Why is that?
Let's call it fragility to stress. Why is that so prevalent in some corners of the left, do you think? Because it seems to me that the right almost identifies itself as being even if it's not true, even if this isn't how they show up, it's how they state, which is I'm built for hard things. Everyone's Tim Kennedy with a knife behind his back. That doesn't seem to be the same on the left at the moment. And that, to me, seems like a self-defeating ideology because you're making yourself inherently more fragile and less capable of dealing with anything that you come up against, including the ideology on the opposite side of the aisle that you say that you hate.
Yeah. I think that people on the left have to adopt my ideology. I think that you have to teach people about the unfairness of systems and all of that. I think that's good to know. It's good to be aware of it. But you also have to treat people as individuals at the end of the day and tell them like, hey, listen, like despite how unfair the world is or whatever, you can't sit there and cry about it. You have to do something about it. So, you know, like class analysis should be like a medical diagnosis. When you go to the hospital and you get a diagnosis for some sort of like medical ailment or medical disease or whatever.
Are you from the left? Are you from the right?
Sure. The reason why you get the diagnosis, the only reason why we have diagnoses for things is because there's a treatment plan, right? So if you talk to somebody, you say like, hey, listen, you're part of this class and you might be affected in this way. This is what you have to do about it, right? It has to come paired with that piece of advice. It can't just be, you're part of this class, so you're part of this, so like you'll never get it, you know, right? It's gotta be like, okay, well, you've got this, so keep this in mind, do this, you know. I notice it when it comes to like mental ailments. People will do that a lot. Like on Twitter, people are like, oh, like I've got OCD, I've got ADHD, blah, blah, blah. They'll say these things like, okay, well, what are you doing about it? And it's like, what do you mean, what am I doing about it? It's like, well, what the is the point of knowing you have this thing if you're not doing anything about it, right? Or when people will say things like, oh, I can't do that because of my ADHD. And it's like, what do you mean you can't do that because you're ADHD? If you have ADHD, do something about it. What the why would you just use that as an excuse to do nothing, you know?
What is your vision, or if you were able to try and give some advice to liberals in general, you know, you're coming from the left. As far as I'm concerned, you're the most reasonable person that I listen to.
Period. No, I'm just kidding.
Look, close. I really appreciate the stuff that you put out. I think both me and a bunch of people from Austin who would not really listen to anybody that was coming from that side of a talking point are like, Destiny keeps on getting these things right, as far as I can see. And even if it's not the background that I come from, like, yeah, like that's reasonable. It's well balanced. It's understanding. It's agentic. It's aspirational, which I think is really, really important. Like, if the vision that you put forward for somebody is to be this like cucked victim that is completely at the mercy of the world around you, how are you selling this to almost anybody that wants to have a grand vision for their life? First off, what's your prediction for the way that the left moves forward? Not what do you want to happen, but given where we're at, the progressive eating itself, etc., is that going to self-correct and move more back toward this vision that you've got and something from the late 90s, early 2000s? Or is this continuing to run away with itself into an extreme?
I think it's kind of sad, but I think the progressives are starting to fall apart. I don't think whatever comes next will call themselves progressive. Like, I still do, but I have to qualify it a lot because I don't want people to instantly assume a bunch of things about me. If you've been watching it online, have you seen like the Young Turks?
Correct. Yeah. Explain to people briefly what's happened with the Young Turks.
Well, if you've watched my stream, they're basically going through what I went through 3 years ago, where it was really funny because like Anna was saying on the Young Turks, she's like, I'm tired of working with these leftists. They come on this show, they build up a big audience, and then they leave the show and they act like they never heard you before and they just start trashing you. And I've without naming names, I've had people do the exact same thing to me. And it's funny because like if I leave somebody's show and then somebody asks me something in the future, I think I've had people ask me about you because I think that you're a bit more into some of the manosphere red pill stuff than I think I am.
Tangential.
I think so, yeah. In terms of some of your takes. And I want to say, people can find it if I'm wrong, but like if people ask me about you, if I see a clip of you, I'm going to say, I talked to him on a podcast. He seems like a pretty reasonable guy. We might have some disagreements here. I think that would be about my take. But I feel like other people will come away, like imagine you're me and then I'm like a random leftist. Somebody would show me one clip of you and they'd be like, oh, he probably hates women. That guy is just a piece of shit. And it's like, you talk to this guy, you were on this guy's show, or sometimes you had extended relations with these people, but as soon as they do one thing wrong, it's like the backlash is insane. And it happens so much with progressives, where for Anna, it was over two big things. One is she had something to say about homeless people because there was some homeless guy in Seattle or San Francisco that attacked a woman on the street. This happened a year or two ago. Oh yeah, it was a huge thing. And she was like, this is crazy. This guy should be in jail. And all the progressives were like, you can't just put homeless people in jail. They're unhoused neighbors and blah, blah, blah. I was like, oh my God. There was that big thing. That was a year or two ago with Anna. And then recently it was over the...
Don't call me a womb haver or whatever.
Yeah, a birthing person or whatever.
Haver, whatever.
And everybody's like, oh, you're transphobic and you hate trans people. It's like, bro, the Young Turks are like avowedly progressive. Like, these guys aren't even like Democrats. These guys are like progressive. And
Purity spiral.
Yeah, holy shit.
Purity spiral kicking in yet again.
So like, I don't think that's going to last. If you're getting like the Young Turks breaking off your movement, like, I don't think that's going to last for very much longer. And again, like you said, like these people have like no tenacity to deal with anything, so they all eat themselves alive. They all have very low ability to cope or deal with adversity. It's just like a horrible,
Someone called you alt left.
The squirrel?
No, someone replied to me on Twitter.
Oh,
they basically said, interesting conversation you had about such and such recently. Would love to see someone from the left's take. And I replied and said, interesting, I've got Destiny coming on in a week's time. Like, basically, you're not a real leftist. Or alt-left was like a way to discard the fact that I was bringing you on. That wasn't left enough. I didn't even know that alt-left was a thing.
There's a weird Twitter account that calls me alt-left, but she says that because I'm like not conservative, but I'm like racist and transphobic and bigoted and a Nazi and blah, blah, blah. So I don't know if that was a reference to that or not.
Purity spiral kicks in again. Yeah. So, okay, so you've said that you think that this progressive thing is not going to be able to sustain itself.
I think people are getting a little tired of like the crazy cancellation shit.
Yes.
And the left are obviously all eating themselves alive, and they haven't gotten any political power.
It's inherently self-defeating, right? If everybody is constantly looking for whoever is next going to be shaved off the outside of the purity spiral, it's so self-contradictory that after a little while, everybody has to abandon it because everyone has had the finger pointed at them or themselves.
I feel like everybody does this. I feel like every time a group gets like massively in power, they can't help but like eat themselves alive. I feel like I remember this in was McCain Palin 2008? Maybe you weren't
Wrong
here.
Country.
Where Republicans get like in power and then they start like eating themselves alive because they're starting to cut off because like this guy is like a Mormon and this guy is like kind of weird or blah. So I mean, like it feels like anytime a group gets in power, they start that weird like purity testing where it's like, you can't be part of this group and you don't do this. And
But we're seeing that on the right as well, to some degree, right?
a little bit, although I think for different reasons, kind
Yes.
of. Trump is insane. And I think I think there's like a unique set of things that are causing the problem. The big difference is the number of tenants. In the United States on the left, for as much as progressives might be powerful on Twitter or in schools or whatever, they represent a very small portion of the Democratic Party. They don't really have very much political power. There's like 4 people in the House and like that's it. But on the right, Trump is their like extremist guy, and that's like half the Republican Party will follow Trump off a cliff right now. So they have like a very unique situation where they're trying to deal with that at the moment, I think.
Why didn't the Trump indictment get more media coverage? I thought it would have been. I mean, it was not covered, but I figured it should have been something absolutely massive, and it didn't seem that way to me.
It was massive for a day, but our news cycles are very quick now. It's like we get over shit in like 1 or 2 days. Also, the indictments are kind of like boring. It wasn't like anything like super spicy. Even though people have been saying they were going to be pretty boring, and they came out and they're kind of like meh. So, but then it's also like Trump is just very fatiguing. There are so many like insane things involving him all the time that at some point it's like hard to care anymore. You're just like, oh yeah. Like even the whole indictment, the things surround really like if we were to go back like 5 years or 6 or 7 years, like the most surprising thing would be like, could you imagine having a president of the United States that was porn stars behind his like recently had a child's wife's back? That's like an insane thing. Could you imagine if Obama had done that?
The bar is now set incredibly high.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Or incredibly low, depending on how you view it. Yeah. So it's like, so now it's like, oh, Trump did a thing. It's like, okay, whatever, you know.
What about the fact if this progressive thing isn't viable because the progressives that are telling people how to live their lives are the ones that are killing themselves and on antidepressants? What is it, like some insane percentage of?
Jeez, for some, it's like 50% of I think liberal women at a certain age have been like on some type of like antidepressants. Like Jesus.
Yes, if that's the you should live your life this way. Well, come on, like proof's in the pudding. This doesn't really seem to be growing particularly much corn.
Have you seen the Twitter video where somebody's like, it's time to like rise up, my communist brothers, we need guns and shit, and then it starts playing some like 90s pop punk emo song, and it's just like tweet after tweet of like oh I have to show this to you later. It's really funny. Sorry.
Okay.
Remind me to show you this. People in the audience know what I'm talking about.
Okay. So if the progressive thing isn't viable, does that mean that the trad thing's viable?
No. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And this is what frustrates me so much is that progressive are obviously lost, but then like conservatives or some of the trad people are like, okay, we're gonna go back to being trad. No, you're not. We're never getting rid of abortion. We're never getting rid of birth control. Women are working in ways that they never have before, and they have so much control over reproduction that the world is fundamentally changed.
Yeah.
And whatever we go forward with in the world, it has to take into account those two realities. So anybody that's walking out here expecting that men can get women with paychecks or by being alpha, everything you're saying doesn't matter anymore. You're talking about a world that doesn't exist anymore. And anybody that's talking about like very traditional roles in terms of like who's earning more money in the household or whatever, you're probably not relevant anymore. So we have to carve out some world in the future where we have some idea of a masculine or male archetype that's compatible with the fact that your wife might be earning or even out earning you, right? That has to be a thing, because once Pandora's box is open in terms of like the reproduction shit and the working shit, it's just not going to go away. Women are going back to what they were before. It's not going to happen. And it sucks because like it would be interesting to see a lot of like trad talks in that direction. There's only one person I've ever heard give a good take on trad relationships, and it was Ben Shapiro. Did you see Ben Shapiro's conversation with Lex Friedman?
Bits of it.
I come from a very conservative background. I grew up Catholic. And when I listen to traditional people talk about male-female relationships, the fact that the woman was staying in the house, it was always something that was spoken about with the utmost amount of respect. A woman might stay in the house, but like this whole, the way that like the father is the leader, like it's kind of true, but it was always with consultation and consent and cooperation. Yes, always. And the way that people talk about it today is with such derision and hatred for women, and like, oh yeah, like she stays in the house, the man is the leader, the man is in charge. And it's like even the sitcoms before, even when the fathers were highly competent, show that the woman was very much an important figure. Bill Cosby was he a doctor or a dentist? And like his wife, like even he was scared of his wife. In The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the Uncle Phil was a high-powered attorney lawyer, and his wife was very scary, right? That was always the case.
And when you roll that forward into the period where men became the clowns, the Homer Simpsons of the world, the Peter Griffins of the world, it's even more. It's the one that is the competent one. She's the one that's balanced. She runs the home. She runs the man.
Yeah, even in a traditional sense. So like when the trad people talk about this, is one of my big complaints about like red pillars. Is there's always so much adversity between men and women, rather than like cooperation. So any trad thing going forward, I don't think there's anything wrong with trad stuff. Some of it is fun. Like some masculine and feminine roles can be fun in the bedroom, out of the bedroom, whatever. But it has to be done with respect to where the kind of like the labor market is and the education and everything and the reproductive rights are today, because that's not going to change. So it has to incorporate that going forward.
How do you square the circle of women's, I'm going to call it over success, but women's increased success in both education, employment, and status with the fact that on average women want to date a man who's as educated or more, as employed or more, as statesful or more? Women
want to, but that has changed pretty dramatically. I wish I had the study in hand, but I want to say it was like 20 years ago. It was like 45% of women would never consider dating a guy that was earning less than them. And I think that number has fallen out to like 29%. And it'll probably continue to change over time. But yeah, that's going to be something changing going forward. This might just be my capitalist mindset, but like I always, when people email me and they always say like, Destiny, I want to start like this business, or I want to start this website, I want to blah, blah, like, what's your piece of advice to me? The one thing that I always ask somebody is, if you want to start a small business, the first question, in my opinion, you should be able to answer is, why would somebody use your thing over anything else? If you don't have a snappy response to that, then quit. Go do something else. You need to know immediately, like, they want to use my thing or watch me because I can offer this unique thing. And I think you should approach everything in life like that. So if you're a man and you're approaching a woman and you're trying to say like, okay, I want to be in a relationship with a woman. Well, what do you have to offer? What's the value add? It can't just be a paycheck because women are working. It can't just be because she's got birth control and Tinder. It has to be something more than that. And people aren't equipping men, I think, to have a good answer to that question. You know, you can talk about like the alpha hypermasculine stuff, but like to be that masculine, you're talking about like 1% of guys. You know, you're talking about like even 6-figure, depending on where you're at, might not necessarily be the shit. You know, you're talking about a very, very, very small percentage. So I feel like a lot of people aren't equipping men like to be able to like have that value add for women.
What are some of the value adds then, if it's outside of providing resources, employment, etc.?
There's going to be I'm going to trigger a lot of people saying this. Here's how I view like the world has gone. Okay, women were feminine, men were masculine, and women over the past 20, 30, 40 years have done a really good job at kind of like capturing and incorporating a whole bunch of masculine traits. Okay. Women are working. They have a lot of independence. They're kind of managing their shit. They've done a really good job at incorporating that while also still being feminine. Some people say that make you less feminine, but like they still have like the feminine traits too. They can take care of houses. They can clean and all this shit. Maybe some of them can't cook, whatever. For men, I feel like because of the way that we were raised, the way that we're socialized or whatever, we still kind of have our masculine things, like men can work jobs and do that. And they do, sometimes even to their detriment. For example, like over the coronavirus pandemic, men were staying home more than women to continue working to provide for their families, right? So the education gap grew even more during the pandemic.
7 times more men dropped out of college during COVID than women.
Yeah, to maintain like households and everything, right? So men are still working, they're doing that. But the problem is men haven't incorporated any of the feminine traits into their like psyche. So women are now like these like alpha, omega, like masculine, feminine creatures that are now going through the world. And men are like, okay, well, I'm very masculine. And it's like, okay, well, can you be communicative? Do you have emotional intelligence? Can you do any of these things that traditionally like guys don't give a about? Because like I don't need to be emotionally intelligent. I have a paycheck. Yeah, you need my money to survive, bitch. What are you gonna do, right? And now she's like, well, I have enough money. You. I was like, okay.
So one of the things that I could see as a complication or a wrinkle there is that the sex drive and desire for women from men is so great that even a woman who has ingrained her masculine is still going to be attractive to the guy.
For sure.
I'm not convinced that a guy who has embodied his feminine becomes more attractive to a woman, especially when you have this disparity with regards to earning and education.
I think it's possible. I just think we have like really weird and toxic ideas of like what feminine means, especially from like red pill or manosphere spaces. I run into this all the time. That, for instance, it's Oh man. Okay. Here's a really, really insane example to me that I hear. Okay. I don't know if you've said this, but a lot of red pillars say this thing where it's like, you should never, ever be emotionally vulnerable to a woman because she might
never, ever said that. I'm not, just to get it out there so that you understand my positioning within the world of men's advice. I'm not a part of the manosphere. I never have been. I'm not red pill. I never have been.
Gotcha. Okay.
I am so blue pilled that I'm cooked in the eyes of the manosphere, and I'm so bigoted that I'm a misogynist in the eyes of Guardian readers. So I split the difference straight down the middle. You have
okay.
And when it comes to the emotional vulnerability thing, that is a story that is told by men who have only ever been in relationships with women who haven't got good emotional control. There are women out there who will, and I've been in relationships with a ton of them, that saw vulnerability as a strength. That saw me opening up as... Or even so people will say that, like, if you're ever emotionally vulnerable, she might leave you, right? But if you're if you're an emotionally intellectual man, emotional intelligence, emotional vulnerability is one of the biggest tools a manipulator can use to totally mind somebody, because showing limited amounts of vulnerability can get a woman incredibly obsessed with you. And any guy that is a manipulative person knows that. Well, think about what the push and pull is, right? The high-powered boss bitch female lawyer that wants to be tied up and dommed by her husband on a nighttime. Why is that hot? Why is that interesting? Because of the polarity.
Sometimes,
The same thing goes for the guy that can be vulnerable on one side, but is also super competent, going out there and doing his thing, is able to show strength, but show something else too.
Yes, absolutely. The polarity is really important. And I know this in my life because I'm online. I'm like hyper aggressive, ultra debate bro, very, I'll say masculine. I'm very, very, very aggressive. But then, did you say want to be pegged in the bedroom? No, nice try. But like on a personal level, if somebody sees me and I'm like a bit more emotionally vulnerable or a bit more open to somebody, it feels like very special. It feels very earned. Like, oh, cool. Like, and every woman I've talked to, I have never in my life had a woman tell me like, God, I wish you would just be more aggressive to me personally. It's always like, I wish you would open up more. I wish you'd be like more blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I try. I have issues with it sometimes, but that's an idea of like what it means to be more feminine. But every time you say that to like a red pill or whatever, they're like, oh, you want to just like cry and sob and blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, that's called being a fucking child. Okay. Not being emotionally intelligent.
Think about that. It's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war quote that everybody loves to throw around. Okay. Turn that on its head and say it's exactly the same thing. But in this instance, being a warrior is being able to integrate your emotions.
Yeah.
But okay, is it not better to have an understanding of your emotions, be in connection with them, and then choose to deploy them when you think that it's appropriate and be able to open up, as opposed to being like, no, this is just a black box that me and no one else is ever going to look at, and I'm going to die at age 70 because of like emotional, spiritual death.
Yeah, it's really dumb. Like that, having that emotional intelligence is so important. It's the number one thing I need to work on in my life that I'm like actively like working a lot with my wife even, is like try to be like a little bit more emotionally communicative, because I've grown up like as a very stoic person. But I think that every woman wants like that type of communication with a guy on a healthier level. But a lot of men don't learn it because we don't really communicate with ourselves like that.
There are some women out there, I think, that would see, I've been around them, ones that will say, if I see my partner make a joke that doesn't land, I cringe inside, my ovaries shrivel up inside, that they're hyper attuned to a man's status.
There might be. There are also some women that only date guys with super huge forearms. But I mean, like, there's always going to be like the exceptions, of course.
Whatever you say.
Yeah, well, there you go, yeah. But I mean, like, in general, like being a bit more emotionally intelligent and communicative is pretty important as a guy, I think. You need to be, especially to understand like women, like you need to be more in tune with yourself to see it like in other people too.
Remember as well that the biggest predictors when it comes to longevity in a relationship are emotional stability, conscientiousness, growth mindset. Those are the ones that they have the best predictive power. The stuff like traditional attractiveness, education level is controlled for a little bit, but earnings have none of this. But that's not what you're optimizing for. And this is where I think that in trying to integrate some of the insights that I talk about a ton on the show, but saying, okay, what's your outcome goal here? Is your outcome goal to be able to as many girls as possible, or to sleep with one guy and never catch feels? Or is it to try and have a flourishing relationship that's going to make you feel fulfilled and not mean that you die alone at like fucking 75 with a ton of dogs?
Yeah.
Like, what are we optimizing for?
Yeah. And like I talk about, like, in my opinion, there's like, people treat it as like there's two boxes. You've got femininity and masculinity. And then like you try to like maximize women femininity, men masculinity. And I always do it as like, there's like three boxes. You've got like femininity, maturity, and masculinity. We all need to work on our maturity. And then like femininity and masculinity is like really fun things on the side. You know, if you've got a guy who is incredibly intelligent, he's a hard worker, he's really driven, he's in tune with everything, and he's tries his best. Like, that's awesome. If he's also like 6'4", that's a bonus. It's like a fun thing on the side. Or if you've got a girl who's got like, she's got all of her stuff figured out and she's got like big boobs, like that's cool. Like the masculine and the feminine things are like really fun things on the side, and they can like be really fun things to play with, but that's not like the main driving, contributing successes in these relationships, I think,
Think about what current dating optimizes for, though. It optimizes for those easily displayable objective metrics of success. It's the Rolex on your Tinder profile. It's the number of followers that you've got. It's the blue tick. It's the car. It's the size of the boobs. It's a lip filler, etc.
For sure.
etc.
Yeah. And for men today, it's TRT.
It is TRT.
I think guys are heading towards a world where we're finally going to start to see how negative social media can affect you in the way that has been affecting women for so long. Okay?
Why?
Because all these motherfuckers now, okay, all these guys, I don't give a fuck. 99% of fitness influencers are on fucking gear, and TRT counts as gear now. Okay? Every motherfucker. I've seen so many videos, so many things where guys are like, oh, these are like my 6-month results for like lifting or whatever. And these guys are like, they're lean as fuck. They're getting huge. And it's like, oh, like I'm 27 lifting for the first time in 5 months. This is like, bro, really?
So why is that? What's that got to do with the female impact of social media?
Because I think for women, women see like a whole bunch of like, this is what women should look like. You should be this and that. And like everybody's using like filters and lip filler and
but TRT is the
for guys. It's like,
filter.
yeah, it's going to be next thing. Like, oh, well, if you're a guy and you've been lifting for 6 months, you should look like this. And it's like, no shot. Yeah.
Interesting.
And I'm seeing more and more of those like pop up everywhere now where it's almost like, and because TRT is so accessible these days.
Have you ever had your levels done? Have you ever checked what your tests are?
They're very low.
What do you think?
The last time I checked is 308.
Wow, that is low.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like nearly subclinical, I think. Like you would.
It's like, I've heard the range is anywhere from 300 to 1,000.
So you've got 8. You're playing with 8.
Yeah, or 350 to 1,000, so I'm already below it. But I don't have any of the symptoms of low T, so like, yeah, I'm in the gym, I'm doing my best, but yeah.
Well played. We were talking before we got started about sort of some of the challenges of how people observe success, especially in the modern world. Mm-hmm. You have a lot of young people that watch the stuff that you do. You probably communicate with a bunch of them either like through stream or privately as well. Mm-hmm. What do young people believe will make them happy in the modern world, but actually won't? What are some of the myths that they're told about sort of finding meaning and fulfillment in life?
I feel like this is a really hard one for me because I think my mind works in a pretty unique way and that I am a very individual, not powered by other people's approval kind of mindset. It's helped me a lot in the streaming world because I've been able to deal with a lot of people hating me at one point in time. So I'll say this cautiously, but I feel like chasing other people's approval it's a bad way to live because it's very much like live by the sword, die by the sword type of thing, to where if other people's approval makes you feel really good about yourself, other people's disapproval is going to make you hate yourself.
You're outsourcing your self-worth to the crowd.
Yeah, I've always been big on like self-esteem and self-confidence are called that because they come from yourself. Like if you're a self-confident person, but only because you've got a huge support network and everybody around you is telling you a good job, it's not. That's fragile. Not truly. That's fragile. Yeah, you like self-confidence is like I want to do a thing and everybody's calling me retarded, but I'm going to do it anyway because I think it's the right thing to do. Like that's like self-confidence. That's what you really want. To some extent, you don't want to be like a narcissist, but yeah. So I think that trying to find things that give you like a genuine source of joy, that like give you like a deep sense of meaning that feel really good. For me, it was music. It's really fun to do musical things. I don't care if other people like it or don't. That's a really cool hobby for me.
Don't care if you suck.
No, I don't give a I don't like impress anybody. Those types of things are really important. If you spend your whole life living by other people's opinions of you, you'll die by other people's opinions of you. Yeah.
There's a desire sometimes that I notice in myself, especially if I'm in a zero-sum backbitey mentality where I'm trying to get one over on somebody else, that I'll find myself almost trying to win at a game that I know that they care about, but I don't. So let's say that I get a ton of pushback on the podcast or on something that I've done to do with the fact that I'm way too blue-pilled. And I'll think, okay, well, I'm bigger than you. Like I'm in better condition, I'm leaner than you, I'm stronger than you. I'll better go to the gym and this will motivate me more to go to the gym. And it's like, no, hang on a second. Like you're playing a game that you know that those people value, but it's not your game. Like where does this come from?
Yeah.
So you can almost find a way where people take the desires of those around them, import them in, and then say, oh, I'm going to do all of these different things which involve winning at everybody else's game without ever working out what the game is that I care about, without working out what would genuinely fulfill me.
Yeah.
And then when you look back and you think, oh, what is the list of accomplishments or pursuits that I've gone through? And you just see shadows of everyone else. You know what I mean?
trying really hard to think because I just watched in the past day or two something about like how when other people like invoke hatred in you, you're basically letting them control you and in your life. Yeah.
Yes.
Like a guiding principle that I've used for my life is there are things that I want to do. And I have to be a certain person to do those things. So for me, success is like improving myself and kind of gradually sculpting and building myself to be that person. And the only person I can compare myself to is myself because everybody's got like a unique starting point.
Jordon Peterson.
Yeah, maybe it might. Jordan Peterson had a lot of good things to say before like 2018, I think, before his brain broke. Honestly, truly, he really did have a lot of good things to say. But yeah, like truly like the most important person to compare yourself to is yourself. He has the same starting position as you. He has all the same things going for him and against him. And as long as you're doing better than you were yesterday, like you're making improvements. And that's like the best way to live, I think.
One of the problems you would have there, especially from current progressive ideology, would be that doesn't take into account all of the challenges that we're facing systemically and so on. You go, well, no, it does, because both versions of you are facing the exact same problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it is so disempowering. Again, this sort of everything is outsourced, everything is systemic, the world is against you. I can see how it must be very disempowering. It must be very disempowering to be somebody who, there's how much is political ideology heritable? It's like 25%.
I think it's like 0.6 or 0.7. It's like very high, like 60, 70%.
Okay.
Very, very, very heritable. Yeah.
Right. So my point being that you are basically working from a genetic backup of what's going on here. And you can have a world in which you want to have the driven individual agency, personal sovereignty, all of that shit. Mm-hmm. But you also happen to hold this political view that doesn't really seem to work, and it seems to be a lot of friction going on.
There is friction. I don't know how to explain it, but there is a way. There's got to be a way to do it. You
know that you're an outlier with this. Right?
I know, but like, so for instance, right? I've been taking the gym very, very, very seriously for the past like 6-7 months. I've been taking it pretty seriously for the past 2 years, but very seriously for the past 6-7 months.
Good man.
Okay. When I go to the gym, okay, it's hard. Okay. And it's hard to progress. And I'm probably starting off at a lower level of muscle, and I'm probably taking a little bit longer to progress in my lifts than I would otherwise. And when I go to the gym, two things have to exist in my mind at the same time. One is, okay, progress is going to be a little bit slower than me. Okay. I know that. I understand that. Okay. I accept that, but I still have to try as hard as I can. Those two things can't counteract each other. And if you're not careful, the problem is that, like, in a way, 308T for me, is it nanoliters per decigram or whatever it is, right? 308 for me is like the liberal mindset, and being as big as possible is the conservative mindset, right? If I let that 308 number define me, why the would I even bother going to the gym? I'm never going to be as big as I could have been if I would have started lifting at 15. I'm never going to be as big as a guy willing to do TRT. I'm never going to be as big as a guy that's just natty, more testosterone than me. Why should I waste my time? But if I go to the conservative route, right? Okay, well, it's taking me 6 months of grinding to get my squat up to like 195. Like another guy would be at like 315 by now, right? I'm a fucking weak piece of shit. Why the fuck am I like, I can't, I'm trying every day. I'm just going to add 5 pounds to the bar. I'm going to injure myself like every 2 months, right? That's like the conservative mindset. It's like, I don't care about this systemic shit. I'm going to work as hard as possible. And it's funny because in a way, through my kind of like lifting history, I've dealt with both of these, right? On the conservative mindset, one is like, I don't know how many people realize this, but like pushing yourself in the gym is actually really easy. The hard thing is the discipline to control your meals, your sleep, and the routine. That's the really hard part. It's really easy to go to the gym and work out till you get injured. I can do that all day. And I've done that before. It's like, 10 more pounds on the bar. I just snap my shit. I injure my shoulder. Me, And then on the liberal side, it's also where it's like, me, my T is low anyway. Do I really need to be shredded? Right? I got a lot of money. I a lot of women. I'm really successful online. Who the cares if I have low T and I don't? Yeah, right. So I don't know how I do it. I manage to for most things in my life somehow, but you have to be able to balance those two things out. Where it's like, I'm going to work as hard as I possibly can because I want to be the best version of myself, and I recognize that how good I can be as myself might be controlled by some environmental factors. But like, there's the environmental factors are saying that I can exist in this range. But in this range, the conservative or personal factors are going to determine where in this range I exist.
It's all on you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I really like that conception. One other thing I've been thinking about is the gap between opinions and deeds. Mm-hmm. So for pretty much all of human history, the thing that you said and the thing that you did were very closely aligned, right? You couldn't say a thing that didn't involve you being there to say it. There wasn't some, up until the printing press and who had access to that. So if you were going to make a statement about how virtuous you are, about the way that you acted, the way that you showed up, what time you got up, how many berries you caught, what animal you killed, etc., all of that would be pretty much there in front for everyone to stress test it. Is this real? Now, someone's opinions and their deeds have been separated so much that all that we see of people, for the most part, are opinions. You can be the most loving, caring partner, the most well-balanced, liquid, whatever. Pick whatever it is that you say. That is able to be out front, and no one is really going to be able to stress test what's happening behind. This, I think, is fostering the performative empathy, or the ability for people to do a performative empathy, which is why I'm always so skeptical when someone starts talking online about proselytizing. They're so caring about this particular maligned group, but then a couple of months later you see them throw the same sort of shade that they've just been protecting someone against another group. And this is why hypocrisy and scandal are probably, I would say, the most catnip content on the internet, because what you get to do is it's perfectly designed for social media. You get to say, here is something that happened before, or that they said before, and here is something that they've done now. Look at the difference between these two things. Yeah. And that's, again, the performative empathy thing, to me, makes a lot of super progressive commentators seem disingenuous. And I think...
Yeah, it's a really hard one. Something that I said earlier in this conversation was that our identity is sharded between all of society. Like, who you are is not just who you are. It's what everybody thinks you are. Yes. Right? As much as that is a horrible concept. This is something that I've had to wrestle with a lot over the past few years. For me personally, my kind of idea was like, listen, I'm going to let my actions speak for themselves. Okay. You might think I am or whatever, but like, look at my history. And I've realized that's actually not good enough to where, so like, for instance, I think I've done a lot of like pretty cool political things in terms of motivating my fan base to get out and canvass for people. Personally, I've spent, I think at this point, over $150,000 housing people, hotels, getting people to go to places, canvassing and all of this. I spent a lot of my own money on this and a lot of my own time on this. I think it's a really cool political project, but I'm not like here, like bragging about it or jerking off about it because, you know, oh, my actions speak for themselves. But I noticed that when I show up in certain areas, people are very, very, very quick to be like, oh, didn't you say this about Kyle Rittenhouse? Didn't you make this joke about black people? Didn't you say this? And it's like, okay, well, I've also done like this shit. I don't know about that. I don't care. And it's like, okay, well, So to some extent, like doing the PR and the virtue signaling is actually kind of important. And now I've had to be like, okay, hey, I did this thing. I need you guys to know that, because in the future, I know you fuckers are going to attack me for every negative thing I said. So I need to be like front and center with all the positives. So it's a very irritating thing to have to work with, because I do agree to some extent. It's nice to like, I want my actions to speak for themselves, but your actions don't say anything. You have to actually speak for them, you know?
Yes.
It's very frustrating. Yeah.
Because there is an asymmetry of attention placed on the stuff that you do that is bad versus
depending on the agent that you're interacting with, because they don't want to give attention to your good things, you know?
Yes. So you need to be out front with those sometimes. Well, again, but the problem is, in a world in which opinions and deeds have been separated so much, the level of how heavily you're going to be scrutinized and discredited for the things that you say. It's like, okay, where's the fucking receipts? Show me the homeless person that you housed. Show me the images of them going in there. And then if you do that, oh, well, you're capitalizing on your like fucking social media altruism project.
I think you just have to own some of it. That's what I say. Like, for instance, like for people will do YouTube videos where they give away money to homeless people, they do whatever, and people are like, oh, you're just doing that for publicity. And it's like, well, it's not just for blah, blah, blah. No. Fuck it. Say you are doing it for publicity. Who the f cares? The homeless guy that's getting the money doesn't give a fuck why you're giving him money. He doesn't give a fuck if you're doing it for publicity. Right? He's getting good shit. And who cares if you're getting publicity? You're getting publicity doing a good thing. Who cares if that's the only reason you're doing it? The only reason that I donated $1 million from malaria research and in Africa is because I knew who cares? Fine, that's fine. You should get good attention for it. I think people should just own it. But people are so scared of being like vain or whatever. I mean, being vain in those ways, I think is fine. Like if you're vain because you're a philanthropist, or you're vain because like, oh, like I mentored, 550 young boys and got them out of like prison and like, okay, yeah, who cares? Brag about it. Be, whatever you want about it. I think it's okay to do that, but yeah.
I wonder what's going to happen moving forward. I wonder whether it's going to be the case that we need good deeds to be done so that people are going to be given more leeway with that. Because the amount of scrutiny that does get applied to this stuff, and the amount of, like, it's a disincentive. If you were to say everybody that posts about doing good things online should quite rightly be like, well, yeah, well done. You did go and do that. But this sort of culture of cynicism and satire and like sardonic commentary that we spoke about earlier on seems to kind of take that away.
Yeah, I don't think any of that actually matters at all. We talked about this earlier. I think one or two bad things is enough to undo literally everything you've done. Like Anna is a really great example for the Young Turks. This is like the largest, or was, I think still is, the largest like progressive left-leaning channel. I think Cenk with Kyle Kalinske helped start and fund the Justice Democrats and everything. None of that matters. She made one or two bad statements and now people are like, F Anna, like I'm done with her. It's like, what the fuck?
Do you know what the peak end rule is? Have you heard of this?
Nope.
Okay, so it's a cognitive bias that was discovered by Eamon Tversky and Daniel Kahneman. Kahneman wrote Thinking Fast and Slow. During a colonoscopy, every minute the patients were given a rating and they could rate how painful the experience was. Then 1 day later, they were asked to rate how painful it was, and 6 months later asked to do the same. What they discovered was that there are two parts of an experience that determine the reflective pain that someone remembers, and it was the peak, how high it got at any point throughout, and the end. So they actually discovered that they could change the remembered pain of the colonoscopy by extending the length of the colonoscopy at the end and bringing the pain was basically how much it was moved. If you get moved a lot, it's a lot of pain. If it doesn't get moved much, it's not. So they had a control to be able to work out. So what they did was they found if they just left the little scope thing in the ass for an extra couple of minutes at the end and it wasn't very painful, in retrospect, it was half as painful. The memory was half as painful. So it's called the peak end rule.
Interesting.
I came up with something called the peak hate rule, which is basically that every single content creator on the internet is defined by their most egregious transgression and their most recent transgression. So Jordon Peterson is both a transphobe for, the Bill C-16 thing that he both became most famous for, and I don't know what he said, Sports Illustrated, let's say. Like, that's his thing. Hassan Abi would be most famous for American Deserves 9/11. Yep. And whatever, he bought a mansion.
Donating to Amazon, I think, was a big thing. The Amazon Union thing.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
it's so interesting you say this, because you got there in such a different way, but I actually 1,000,000% agree. I have two different things that I apply this to. One has to do with streaming. Okay. And I see this with a lot of people. They'll get into a very dramatic situation, and online, when you're in drama, I don't know if you've ever been like at the receiving end of like a hate mob online.
Not yet. I'm
when it
waiting
happens,
for it to happen, yeah.
It feels like the end of the world. And I always tell somebody, my saying is like, people only remember you for your last 3 streams. Whatever the fuck you do, don't stop streaming. I know it sucks and it feels like, but keep streaming, and in 2 or 3 days, people will forget. But if you stop now, this is your defining moment and you will never come back. And that rule has worked 100% of the time. I've known people, they got into a big drama and like, I can't, and they take a little bit of break off or whatever, and they're done. They can't do it. They can't go back. Yeah, because it was, wait, what'd you say? Atrioc. Was he the deepfake guy?
Yeah, the deepfake guy. Yeah. He took a big long break, which just allowed everyone to kind of get sucked into it.
Did he get back to streaming? He was a really big streamer, though, right?
Massive time.
I think he's got it. He might be able to break it. But like in general, I've known a lot of people who, it's usually for like the mid-sized people, they'll take that break and then they might try to come back like once, but then that wave of hate flashes and then they quit and they couldn't
That's
push
the footnote to your entire career.
Yeah, and they can't come back and they get fucked by it. And I'm like, just keep. I've had like really dramatic things, and I went to an MLG. I got into a stupid situation.
What's MLG?
Pro gaming tournament. This was like 11 years ago.
Okay.
Really dramatic. I did stupid things. Girl hacked my Twitter account, posted my dick on my Twitter. Just a very dramatic, very stupid thing. And I was home. I streamed the next day. I was like, it. Stream the next day. People made jokes, whatever. 2 or 3 days later, as dramatic in a sense, people were like, okay, we're done. We're through it, right? Just keep streaming. No matter what the happens, keep streaming. In 2 or 3 days, everybody will forget.
What about how to deal with it interpersonally? Let's say that it's not necessarily a content creator, or it might be, it could be someone that just does something that causes the world to point a lot of fingers at them. How do you, where do you go within yourself? Do you spend time with friends? Do you reframe it in a particular way? You
just have to keep giving new impressions of you, I think. So I had 2 examples. One was the professional level. The second thing is, have you ever heard of the saying, you never get a second chance to make a first impression?
Yes.
First impression is so important. Something that I found, this is especially true on dates and when you're making a new impression on somebody. In my personal opinion, the first impression is largely irrelevant. What really matters is the last 30 to 60 minutes of the person. Yeah. Yes. It's like if you go on a date and something is really fun and exciting right at the beginning and the last 2 hours are kind of boring, that's what they're going to remember you for. But if you go on a date and it's kind of it starts awkward, it's whatever, blah, 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 but you end on a high note, that's so much better. It's so good to do that. Just end on a really positive impression of you or something, and the next time that's what they're going to have on their head more than like remembering the first impression. Right. I find personally people don't remember first impressions that much. They definitely remember the last interaction they've had with you though. So yeah, keep having impressions of people. If somebody had a negative impression of you, had a negative thing, like keep trying to have positive interactions. Obviously be careful with this. I'm not saying that like if you give a bad impression, go stalk somebody at work and try to like make them see you differently or whatever. But yeah, you can fuck up, but like don't let that be your last moment with somebody where you're like, oh, I fucked up, I'm not going to talk to them again, because that's all they're ever going to remember of you.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I really like that. And I like the fact that we've come at this from, it couldn't be more different.
Very, very different.
Very different angles.